Okay, so I've been meaning to read David Hume. I have the PDF version of his essay, so I'm only going to read one of them. Is this? Oh, this is a preface. Okay, yeah, that's where it starts. I don't know if anybody's still up, so I'm just going to read it now, and then if you guys are not up, you can catch the replay. All right, so this is essay one on suicide. One considerable advantage that arises from philosophy consists in the sovereign antidote which it affords to superstition and false religion. All other remedies against this pestilent distemper are vain or at least uncertain. Plain good sense and the practice of the world, which alone serve most purposes of life, are found ineffectual. History as well as daily experience furnish instances of men endowed with the strongest capacity for business and affair, who have all their lives crouched under slavery to the grossest superstition. Even gaiety, sweetness of temper, which infuse a balm in every other wound, afford no remedy so virulent to a poison, as we may particularly observe of the fair sex, who, though commonly possessive of their rich presence of nature, feel many of their joys blasted by this importunate intruder. But when found philosophy has once gained possession of the mind, superstition is effectually excluded, and one may fairly affirm that her triumph over this enemy is more complete than over most of the vices and imperfections incident to human nature. Love or anger, ambition or avarice have their root in the temper and affection which the soundest reason is scarce ever able to fully correct, but superstition is being found on false opinion, must immediately vanish when true philosophy has inspired juster sentiments of superior powers. The contest is here more equal between the distemper and the medicine, and nothing can hinder the latter from proving effectual, but its being false and sophisticated. It will be here superfluous to magnify the merits of philosophy by magnifying the pernicious tendency of that vice of which it curs the human mind. The superstitious man says Tully is miserable in every scene, in every incident in life, even in sleep, which banishes all other cares of unhappy mortals, affords to him matter of new terror, while he examines his dreams and finds in those visions of the night prognostications of future calamities. I may add, though, death alone can put a full period to his misery. He dares not fly to this refuge, but still prolongs a miserable existence from a vain fear lest he offend his Maker, by using the power with which that beneficent being has endowed him. The presence of God and nature are vanished, excuse me, uh, ravished by us by this cruel enemy, and notwithstanding that one step would remove us from the reasons of pain and sorrow. Her menaces still chain us down to a hated being, which she herself chiefly contributes to render miserable. This, observed by such as have been reduced by the calamities of life, of the necessity of employing this fatal remedy, that if the unseeable care of their friends deprive them of that species of death which they propose to themselves, they seldom venture upon any other, or can summon up so much resolution a second time as to execute their purpose. So great is our horror of death that when it presents itself under any form besides that to which a man has endeavored to reconcile his imagination, it acquires new terrors and overcomes his feeble courage. But when the menaces of superstition are joined to this natural uh, timidity, no wonder it quite deprives men of all power over their lives. since even many pleasures and enjoyments to which we are carried by a strong propensity are torn from us by this inhuman tyrant. Let us endeavor to restore men to their native liberty by examining all common arguments against suicide, ensuring that that action may be free from every imputation of guilt or blame, according to the sentiments of all the antient philosophers. If suicide be criminal, it must be a transgression of our duty either to God, our neighbor, or ourselves. To prove that suicide is no transgression of our duty to God, the following considerations may perhaps suffice. In order to govern the material world, the Almighty Creator has established general and immutable laws by which all bodies, from the greatest planet to the smallest particle of matter, are maintained in their proper sphere and function. To govern the animal world, He has endowed all living creatures with bodily and mental powers, with senses, passions, appetites, memories, and judgment, by which they are impelled or regulated in the course of life to which they are destined. These two distinct principles of the material and animal world continually encroach upon each other and mutually retard or forward each other's operation. The powers of men and of all other animals are restrained and directed by the nature and qualities of the surrounding bodies, and the modifications and actions of these bodies are incessantly altered by the operation of all animals. Man is stopped by the rivers and his patches over the surface of the earth, and rivers, when properly directed, lend their force to the motion of machines which serve to the use of men. But though the provinces of the material and animal powers are not kept entirely separate, there results from thence no discord or disorder in the creation. On the contrary, from the mixture, union, and contrast of all the various powers of inanimate bodies and living creatures arises that sympathy, harmony, and proportion, which affords the surest argument of supreme wisdom. The providence of the deity appears not immediately in any operation, but governs everything by those general and immutable laws, which have been established from the beginning of time. All events, in one sense, may be pronounced the action of the Almighty. They all proceed from those powers with which he endowed his creatures. A house which falls by his own weight is not brought to ruin by his providence, more than one destroyed by the hands of men, nor are the human faculties less his workmanship than the laws of motion and gravity. When the passions play, when the judgment dictates, when the limbs obey, this is all the operation of God. And upon these animate principles, as well as upon the inanimate, he has established the government of the universe. Every event is alike important in the eyes of the infinite being, who takes in at one glance the most distant regions of space and remotest periods of time. There is no event, however important to us, which he has exempted from the general laws that govern the universe, or which he has particularly reserved for his own immediate action and operation. The revolution of states and empires depend upon the smallest caprice or passion of single men, and the lives of men are shortened or extended by the smallest accident of air or dyes, sunshine or tempest. Nature still continues her progress and operation, and if general laws be ever broke by particular violations of the deity, 'tis after a manner which entirely escapes human observation. As on the one hand, the elements and other inanimate parts of the creation carry on their action without regard to the particular interest and situation of men, so men are entrusted to their own judgment and discretion in the various shocks of the matter, and may employ every faculty with which they are endowed in order to provide for their ease, happiness, or preservation. What is the meaning, then, of that principle that a man who, tired of life and hunted by pain and misery, bravely overcomes all the terrors of death and makes his escape from this cruel scene. That a man, I say, has incurred the indignation of his creator by encroaching on the office of divine providence and disturbing the order of the universe. Shall we assert that the Almighty has reserved to himself, in any peculiar manner, the disposal of the lives of men, and has not submitted that event, in common with others, to the general laws by which the universe is governed? This is plainly false. The lives of men depend upon the same laws as the lives of all other animals, and these are subjected to the general laws of matter and motion. The fall of a tower or the infusion of a poison will destroy a man equally with the meanest creature. An inundation sweeps across everything without distinction that comes within the reach of his fury. Since therefore the lives of men are forever dependent on the general laws of matter and motion, is a man disposing of his life criminal because in every case it is criminal to encroach upon these laws or disturb their operation? I just want to note that this is the second time he's talking about the disposal, right? Because this is what the reason why I'm highlighting this is because this is what I keep mentioning in my book about how slavery is about disposal rights, and it's about the disposal of your person. So if you don't have disposal rights, then you don't own your life. And he's essentially making the same point. Let me see if there's anybody here. Okay, right. Um, okay, now where was I? Um, Without the exercise of this authority, they could not subsist a moment. Every action, the operations of nature. Without the exercise of this authority, they could not subsist a moment. I just read that part already. Every action, every motion of a man innovates on the order of some parts of the matter and diverts from the ordinary course the general laws of motion. Putting together, therefore, these conclusions, we find that human life depends upon the general laws of matter and motion, and it is no encroachment on the office of providence to disturb or alter these general laws. Has not everyone, of consequence, the free disposal of his own life? Again, he's using the word disposal. So I want y'all to note that because I did not use this. I didn't use that out of context when I talk about the disposal rights. Um, and may he not lawfully employ that power with which nature has endowed him in order to destroy the evidence of this conclusion. We must shew a reason why this particular cafe is accepted. Is it because human life is of such great importance that this is a presumption for human prudence to dispose of it? But the life of a man is no greater importance to the universe than of an oyster. And if it were ever so great importance, the order of human nature has actually submitted it to human prudence and reduced us to a necessity in every incident of determining concerning it. Were the disposal of human life so much reserved as to peculiar providence of the Almighty, that if it were an encroachment of on his right for men to dispose of their lives, it would be equally criminal to act for the preservation of life as for its destruction. Let me read that again because that this is a very salient point. Where did this sit and start? Let me just go back a little bit. And if it were ever so great importance, the order of human nature has actually submitted to a human prudence and reduced us to a necessity in every incident of determining concerning it. Were the disposal of human life so much reserved as the peculiar providence of the Almighty, it that it were an encroachment on this right for men to dispose of their lives, it would be equally criminal to act for the preservation of life as for its destruction. Now, let me just comment on that point because basically what he's saying is that it would be an equal crime for you to give up your life to save someone as it would be to destroy it. Like, for example, if you were going to fight in a war, you would not have the right to do that because you it would be a violation against God if you're going to make that an absolute rule that giving up your life for anything for any cause is a violation against God. So he's basically saying you have to apply the same standard. If I can't give my life away for war or any other thing or to save somebody else, then then it's the same standard when it comes to destroying my own life. Now, if I were to turn a stone with which is falling upon my head, I disturb the course of nature and I invade the peculiar uh, province of the Almighty by lengthening out my life beyond the period with by general laws of matter and motion he had assigned it. A hair, a fly, an insect is able to destroy this mighty being whose life is of such importance. It is an absurdity to suppose that human prudence may lawfully dispose of what depends on such insignificant causes. It would be no crime in me to divert the or from its course, were I able to effect such purposes. Where then is the crime of turning a few ounces of blood from their natural channel? Do you imagine that I repine at providence or curse my creation because I go out of life and put a period to a being which, were it to continue, would render me miserable? Far be such sentiments from me. I am only convinced of a matter of fact, which you yourself acknowledge possible, that human life may be unhappy, and that my existence, if further prolonged, would be ineligible. But I thank Providence both for the good which I have already enjoyed, and for the power with which I am endowed of escaping the ill that threatens me. To you, it belongs to repine at Providence, who foolishly imagine that you have no such power, and who must still prolong a hated life, though loaded with pain and sickness, with shame and poverty. Do you not teach that when any ill befalls me, though by the malice of any by though by the malice of my enemies, I ought to be resigned to Providence, and that the actions of men are the operations of the Almighty as much as the actions of inanimate beings? When I fall upon my sword, therefore I receive my death equally from the hands of the deity, as if it had proceeded from a lion, a prefacis, or a fever. The submission which you require to Providence in every calamity that befalls me excludes not human skill and industry. If possible, by their means, I cannot avoid or escape the calamity. And why may I not employ one remedy as well as another? If my life be not my own, if it were criminal for me to put it in danger as well as to dispose of it, nor could one man deserve the impellation of whom glory or friendship transport into the greatest dangers, and another merit the reproach of, or who puts a period to his life from the same or like motives. There is no being which possesses any power or faculty that it receives not from the Creator, nor is there anyone which, by ever so irregular an action which can encroach upon the pain of his providence or disorder the universe. Its operations are his works equally, which that can chain of events which it invades and whichever principle prevails. We may, for that very reason, conclude it be most favored by him. Be it animate or inanimate, rational or irrational, 'tis all a cafe. Its power is still derived from the supreme creator, and is alike comprehended in the order of his providence. When the horror of pain prevails over the love of life, when a voluntary action anticipates the effects of blind causes, 'tis only in consequence of those powers and principles which he has implanted in his creatures. Divine providence is still involatile and placed far beyond the reach of human injuries. 'Tis impetus, says the old Roman superstition, to divert rivers from their course or invade the prerogatives of nature. 'Tis impetus impious says the French superstition and call it for the smallpox or usurp the business of providence or by voluntarily producing distempers and maladies. 'Tis impious, says the modern superstition, to put a period to our own life and thereby rebel against our Creator. And why not impious, say I, to build houses, cultivate the ground, or fell upon the ocean? In all these actions, we employ our powers of mind and body to produce some innovation in the course of nature. And none of them do we anymore. They are all of them, therefore, equally innocent and equally criminal. I ask, why do you conclude that Providence has placed me in this station? For my part, I find that I owe my birth to a long chain of causes, of which many depended upon voluntary actions of men. If so, then neither does my death, however voluntary, happen without its consent. And whenever pain or sorrow so far overcome my patience as to make me tired of life, I may conclude that I am recalled from my station in the clearest and most express terms. 'Tis Providence surely that has placed me at this present in this chamber. But may I not leave it when I think proper, without being liable to the imputation of having deserted my post or station. When I shall be dead, the principles of which I am composed will still perform their part in the universe and will be equally useful in the grand fabric as when they compose this individual creature. The difference to the whole will be no greater than betwixt my being in a chamber and in the open air. The one change is of more importance to me than the other, but not more to the universe. 'Tis is a kind of blasphemy to imagine that any created being can disturb the order of the world or invade the business of providence. It supposes that the being possesses powers and faculties which it received not from its creator and which are not subordinate to his government and authority. A man may disturb society, no doubt, and therefore incur the displeasure of the Almighty, but the government of the world is placed far beyond his reach and balance. This is another point that I made in my book. This is a point that John Locke observed, that to terminate one's life, to dispose of one's life, is only a crime against God. It is not a crime against the state. It is anyway. I make that argument in chapter 2. Now, where was I? A man may disturb society, no doubt, and therefore incur the displeasure of the Almighty. But the government of the world is placed far beyond his reach and balance. How does it appear that the Almighty is displeased with those actions that disturb society? By the principles which he has implanted in human nature and which inspire us with a sentiment of remorse if we ourselves have been guilty in such actions, and with that blame and disapprobation. If we ever observe them in others, let us examine according to the method proposed, whether suicide be of this kind of actions and be a breach of our duty to our and to. A man who retires from life does no harm to society. He only ceases the good. Let me read that again. I'm going to read that again because this is in my epigraph. This is a very important quote. A man who retires from life does no harm to society. He only ceases to do good, which, if it is an injury, is of the lowest kind. All our obligations to do good to society seem to imply something reciprocal. I receive the benefits of society and therefore ought to promote its interests. But when I withdraw myself altogether from society, which I mean, from society, can I be bound any longer? But allowing that our obligations to do good were perpetual, they have certainly some bounds. I am not obliged to do a small good to society at the expense of a great harm to myself. Again, all these arguments, the self-sacrifice. Let me read that again. I am not obliged to do a small good to society at the expense of a great harm to myself. Why then should I prolong a miserable existence because of some frivolous advantage which the public may perhaps receive from me? If upon account of age and infirmities I may lawfully resign any office and employ my time altogether in fencing against these calamities, and elevating as much as possible the miseries of my future life, why may I not cut short these miseries at once by an action which is no more prejudicial to society? But suppose that it is no longer in my power to promote the interests of society. Suppose that I am a burden to it. I make this argument also. Suppose that my life hinders some person from being much more useful to society. In such cases, my resignation of life must not only be innocent but laudable. And most people who lie under any temptation to abandon existence are in some such situation. Those who have health or power or authority have commonly been better reason to be in humor with the world. A man is engaged in a conspiracy for the public interest, is seized upon suspicion, is threatened with the rack, and knows from his own weakness that the secret will be extorted from him. Again, well, he's saying extortion. I say extraction. Let me read that sentence again. A man is engaged in a conspiracy for the public interest, is seized upon suspicion, is threatened with the rack, and knows from his own weakness that the secret will be extorted from him. Could such a one consult the public interest better than by putting a quick period to a miserable life? This was the case of the famous and brave of. Again, suppose a malefactor is justly condemned to a shameful death. Can any reason be imagined why he may not anticipate his punishment and save himself all the anguish of thinking on its uh, dreadful approaches? He invades the business of providence no more than the magistrate did, who ordered his execution, and his voluntary death is equally advantageous to society by ridding it of a pernicious member. So he's basically disagreeing with John Jacques Rousseau. John Jacques Rousseau says that the sovereign is the sovereign determines all matters of life and death. He's saying that it is just as much of a crime for the sovereign to execute someone as it is for you to execute yourself. Why is your own execution any different than the state putting you to death? That suicide may often be consistent with interest and with our duties to ourselves. No one can question who allows that age. Again, he's making all the arguments because so many people are asking me to qualify what type of restrictions, what qualifications, age. I'm not doing that. Let me read that sentence again. That suicide may often be consistent with interest and with our duty to ourselves. No one can question who allows that age, sickness, or misfortune may render life a burden and make it worse even than annihilation. I believe that no man ever threw away a life while it was worth keeping. For such is our natural horror of death. Again, this is about your natural fear of your own annihilation. This is another argument that I've made that everybody is predisposed to fear their own death. It is not something that anybody takes lightly. The whole idea that you would just Toyota Corolla yourself or just go do it like it's something like making a cup of coffee is absolutely absurd. For such is our natural horror of death that small motives will never be able to reconcile us to it. And though perhaps the situation of a man's health or fortune did not seem to require this remedy, we may at least be assured that any one who, without apparent reason, has had recourse to it was cursed with such an incurable depravity or gloominess of temper as much must poison all enjoyment and render him equally miserable as if he had been loaded with the most grievous misfortunes. If suicide suppose if suicide be supposed a crime, 'tis only cowardice can impel us to it. If it be no crime, both prudence and courage should engage us to rid ourselves at once of existence when it becomes a burden. 'Tis the only way that we can be useful to society by setting an example which, if imitated, would preserve to every one his chance for happiness in life and would effectually free him from all danger of misery. So it's the most important thing. If you don't have the right to die, then basically life has no value. Your happiness, um, your happiness is impossible because you basically have a duty to live, even if you are miserable. Um, what? Okay, let me see if I have any comments before I say anything else. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or if anybody wants to discuss it. I can post a link while I'm reading the comments, but um, this is natural law. It doesn't require any um, affirmation from a court. It does not require an articulation of a positive law. This is inherently correct. Um, and most of the literature is not even addressing the state. Most of the literature against self deletion is talking about how it is a crime against God. Hello, Divine. Well, I guess you can have a do now. The way that the Supreme Court interpreted it is that you have, or I'm not going to say interpret because they just made it up. Um, you have a right to refuse you have a right to refuse life-saving medical treatment, right? So, but that is according to Washington versus Glucksberg, that is not the same as a right to a positive assistance in terminating your life. So you can deny life saving treatment, but you don't have a right to positive assistance. Hmm. Well, I mean, I'm an omnivore, so the plant based options are definitely on the table. But I'm not taking anything off the table at the same time. So um, yeah, I'm not going to read the second essay. I just wanted to read the first one. So I just want everybody to know that the arguments that I make in my book did not come out of thin air. I only have one quote from him, but I had already read David Hume, so I was already well versed on the literature. So um, I may come back and read that later, but um, I thank y'all for being here tonight because I know everybody's you know either getting ready to go to bed, or um, I guess you're um, suffering from insomnia or something. But anyway, it's the weekend, so I just wanted to get that out the way, and I'm going to be coming back to reviewing the Pendai. Right, you can have a do not. Um, I need to get a DNR. I really do, but I haven't done it yet. This I don't know. I've just been procrastinating, but it it would only help you if you are already terminally, like if you're fatally ill or something. Like if you're still healthy and something happens to you, they're going to, I guess, do whatever they can to preserve your life. So um, anyway, I just wanted to read that. I don't have any additional commentary. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Um, I guess I will look. I will look to see if there's any literature responding to this. I have not done that yet, so. But this is a response to all of the literature about how it is a crime against God and the state. He's addressing all of those arguments. So you guys have a good morning, good night, depending on where you're located. And um, hopefully, I'll be back to do another live stream.